let's stop talking about people. Let's assume no one is employed and let's focus on roles. And roles being, what are the things that make sense to go together? Okay. And those are the activities that go together as a role, right? And this is really hard because we do know people and we know that people are doing things. And so separating them out becomes really, really difficult. And I also say, and include yourself. We know that you're going to be in the business, but what are also your roles that you're doing?
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. Why does the division of labor in a small business tend to lead to confusion and conflict? If you've got a small team, say like 3 or more, you may have already experienced this. And, if you have a team under 10, you may be wondering why this keeps happening. In today's episode, we're going to explore why the traditional approaches to defining roles and responsibilities that many of us have learned as we've been building our businesses up often fall short, and what you can do instead to create clarity that actually works. I'm Tonya Kubo, joined by business extraordinaire and advisor and co-host and all the things, Gwen Bortner. And today's topic, Gwen, is one I think causes a lot of frustration. I think it causes lost productivity and even conflict within teams and organizations. And while I don't have a tidy way to summarize it, what I'm talking about is how roles get defined in organizations, the responsibilities that fall within each role, and the risk that I think all of us run in terms of having lines so blurry that team members don't know where their job ends and another person's job begins. So for the benefit of listeners who are like, wow, Tonya said a lot of words, none of which mean anything in my brain. Can you, Gwen, give us an example of what this might look like in an organization experiencing the early stages of success?
So the thing that we see all the time is we associate a job with a person, particularly when it's a small organization. So, using us, we're technically an organization of 3, right? So the marketing job is your job, right? That's part of
I do marketing.
You do marketing. But we also have Sophia doing some of the posting and right, that's associated with marketing, right? And so we assume that Sophia's job is one part of the role and your job is another part of the role. And the problem is when we need a 4th person, which luckily we don't need right now, but at some point we could, then it's like, okay, so what pieces go where and why? Because we've associated it with people, not with the actual functioning of the role.
Right.
What's in the role. And this is a thing that I think most people struggle with because we do associate roles with people. And one of the things that I often will have my clients do pretty early on, especially as they're starting to go through any amount of transition, either growth or shrinkage, because sometimes we have them do one, sometimes we have them do the other, is to say, let's stop talking about people. Let's assume no one is employed and let's focus on roles. And roles being, what are the things that make sense to go together? Okay. And those are the activities that go together as a role, right? And this is really hard because we do know people and we know that people are doing things. And so separating them out becomes really, really difficult. And I also say, and include yourself. We know that you're going to be in the business, but what are also your roles that you're doing? And in a small organization, early on where there's only, 1, 2, 3 people, undoubtedly, I mean, like, I don't think I've ever seen this not be true. People are doing multiple roles, right? It's the nature. It's the nature of it. And often they're doing roles that wouldn't necessarily go together, but it's because they've got certain skills that make sense for them to be able to do these multiple roles. The problem is, as we either replace people or we start growing, we don't understand how to separate those roles in a logical way because we think of it as Tonya's job, not the 6 roles that Tonya actually has, right? And so either we, if you were to say, Gwen, I'm sick of you, I'm leaving, I'm never working with you ever again, to find another Tonya, I know enough because I pay attention to roles that I probably need to find 2 people. Because you do marketing and operations / chief of staff work. Those are not necessarily the same person most times.
So I'm going to stop you there and explain why I'm laughing. Because that is actually the story of my professional life. I have never left a job and not been replaced by at least 3 people. So I have 2 questions here. Knowing full well that the purpose of our show really is to serve the CEO, the business owner, right? The woman who is building a rock star business and feeling stretched to the point of breaking, and helping her understand that she can achieve sustainable success, right? That is the goal of our show. But I'm also, I feel like we need to talk to little Tonya, and we need to give little Tonya some coaching here. I want to also know not just how do we as CEOs prevent that scenario in our business, but how can we as service providers, team members, employees, avoid being that person? Because I don't think it feels good on either end, Gwen.
Well, and avoiding being that person is, to me, is a stronger statement than it needs to be. I think it's just understanding that you are that person. Okay. And understanding what that means. Not only do I understand I am that person, but I know what that means. And the person who's hired me also knows what that means. Because that's usually where the problem is when someone hires you and they're getting 2 or 3 really strong, distinctive roles in one body and not understanding that if you're no longer that body, they may need to hire 3 people. Now, they probably don't need to hire 3 people each at the same number of hours that you were, working. Like if you're working 20 hours a week, they don't need 3 people at 20 hours. But they may need 1 person at 5, 1 person at 10, and maybe another person at 7. Because and notice that doesn't equal 20, because the not having to communicate to yourself shortens the time frame. You don't have to tell yourself things. It's all in your head. But when you get 3 people, there's some, communication that's having to go back and forth, which may slow some things down. But also having very distinctive roles may speed some other things up. So there, there's pluses and minuses. But I think it's being really aware what are the roles that any one person is fulfilling, so that we can look at them. Now, the other reason it becomes advantageous is, let's assume we did some massive growth this, I'm not expecting massive growth, but let's pretend we did a 3x growth this next year. Crazy growth. Right. I am sure you're the first to say there is no way that you could do all of the things that would be required with 3x growth.
No.
Based on,
sorry, Gwen. Good, not that good.
Yeah. I mean, because I know you've got other clients, you've got other things. You know, I totally get that. So part of it is understanding which parts of your roles are we going to completely remove from you
Mm-hmm.
and assign to somebody else, so that you can still do the things that maybe are your very best uses,
Mm-hmm.
of your roles. But when we're thinking about it as roles, then it's no longer saying, well, Tonya, you're not good at this, so we're going to it's just like, no, this is just a piece that we're taking away, and it becomes way easier to define it because it's in a box of this
Mm-hmm.
role, right? So one of the things that you do for us is you do onboarding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which I know you enjoy doing. You love getting to know our people and all of those
Mm-hmm.
things. But if we 3x'd, I would take onboarding away from you because
And that would make
it,
me sad. Just
it
so
would
we're
make you
clear.
sad, but it's not necessarily our highest, best use of you, your
Mm-hmm.
time, your expertise. Like I said, you're great at it and I love you doing it, but that's not necessarily the best use of your time. So
Mm-hmm.
that would be a role I would potentially pull out and give to somebody else. We'd have to find them. There's that's a
Right.
whole, another another conversation. But because I know that's a role that you're doing, it's easy for me to pull that out as a separate piece
Mm-hmm.
and not look for a Tonya to do that role, but to look for someone who can do those specific activities.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, I think, is the place where people struggle, is when they're either growing or shrinking, doesn't matter which way,
Mm-hmm.
is all of a sudden they're trying to find people that are similar to the people they already have. And quite honestly, most of the folks that you bring in your early stages of business are a bit unicorny.
Mm-hmm.
That tends to be kind of their nature. And often, if you start shrinking the number of roles they have, it's like, yeah, this is no longer interesting to me. Sometimes that's part of what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding that that's also part of what your give and take is important to say,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, okay, I may have to let this wonderful unicorn person go because
Mm-hmm.
what they really liked was doing these 18 different things. And I actually need 4 people to focus each on these very specific things.
Right, right. Well, and I also think, I mean, that's a really good point because I know one of the challenges that business owners face as they're growing is recognizing that they're like number two, right? Like their very first hire who has been there from day one and has helped them build the business from the ground up is not necessarily the right fit for where they want to go next. And, one thing I learned about myself when I was, working one job full time was that I'm built for startup culture. The moment the job becomes one of just making sure everything doesn't blow up, I'm good. Right? So, what would you say to that?
Well, and I think that's an important distinction, and it's another place that I think folks struggle as they go forward when they're transitioning in their business, because early stage entrepreneurs tend to hire other people that are also very creative, visionary, flexible, all of those things. But for a business to be long-term sustainable in like 90+% of the time, it needs to be what I call boring.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to
It's
be boring,
true. It is
right?
true.
It needs to be boring. It needs to be able, it's like, this happens, then this happens, and this happens, and this happens. And those people are very different people than those early stage people. They don't like the boring, like you said. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you just described yourself.
Yeah.
You don't like the boring. And so this is also where the roles being really well defined makes a difference,
Mm-hmm.
to say which boring piece are we pulling out first.
Right.
Which piece is ready to be boring, because that's also a phase of the whole piece, is when you're growing and developing and starting out, it doesn't all just instantly
Mm-hmm.
become consistent at the same time. it's little pieces and parts, and saying, oh, this is the role now that we can really do consistently. We can define it in a way. And often that means you can bring someone in who actually is at an earlier stage or lower level of experience, because they aren't having to make as many decisions, make as many leaps, do all of those things. And so there's an advantage to it, because now you aren't paying a higher level person to do a more rote, consistent level job. Not that they aren't valuable, not that they're not good, but the reality is probably that lower level person is actually better than the higher level person, because they're just going to do the thing.
Right.
They're not going to try and improve it and fix it and modify it.
And break it so they can fix it.
And break it so they can fix it. Yeah. And so, but understanding that role piece then says, what is that piece I'm pulling out? What is that piece that I'm pulling out, and looking for it, and realizing in some cases there may be someone in the organization who doesn't actually have a skill that's really needed. And so they may no longer have a role. Doesn't mean that they weren't valuable at the time, but they may not be valuable at this stage in the business. And that's hard for all of us, because we, hopefully we like the people that we've hired. They're good people, all of those things. But it's back to using your example. You're a startup person. And so if I release you to go do the next startup, that actually makes you happier than staying in my environment when it becomes a little more boring.
Right. And, the thing is there's somebody out there that really just wants a boring job.
Right.
And that's what excites them. What excites them is that they get up every day knowing exactly what the day is going to hold for them, what time they're going to have lunch, what time they are going to be able to take a walk around the block. That's their ideal situation. And by not keeping your, energized by startup culture person in that role, you're actually making space for that other person to find their dream job.
Well, and this is a conversation I have often with the CEOs, but no one's going to want that job. Well, no, you don't want that job. That is your worst frickin' nightmare. But that doesn't mean there aren't other people who are exactly like you said. It's oh, that is my perfect job. I am so excited about that job. Because we often project the things that we like as what everyone else should like, and the things that we hate as what everyone else should hate. I mean, I just had this conversation with one of my clients who is someone I worked with a long time ago, and now is back because the business is transitioning again. And she realized that she was trying to get one of her good people to do some of the things that she, as the owner, loves to do and is amazing at. And that employee's I don't really want to do it. I'll do it if you're going to make me, but I really don't want to do it. And at the same point is and not wanting to give her the stuff that she hates, because she's no one wants to do this. And that same employee is oh my God, this is so perfect. I totally get it. I love it. It's really fun to do. Right. And it's hard for her to imagine that someone could be as opposite as her. Right. But that's actually what's going to take the business to the next level.
Yeah. Okay. I have one question.
Only one?
Well, no, actually I have 10, but this is something that when I was thinking about this episode, I was I wonder if this is the problem. And so I'm going to ask you, and then you can just tell me, yeah, that's a problem. No, that's not a problem. I feel like one of the problems that leads us to this situation is that we think of a job as a job, and a job, I think any job in an organization has actually four distinct parts. One part is the title we associate with the job. One part are the roles that are associated with the job. Another part are the responsibilities that fall under the roles. And then the fourth is actually the job description. How we have written this job up and assigned all the different, how we label the roles and responsibilities that fall under it, the percentages that we've assigned to various things. Because I think sometimes what happens is we create titles in order to justify the amount of money we want to pay somebody, or maybe we really like somebody, they have the right skill set, and we feel like in order to justify the pay, it has to come with a specific title. So there's this, the title starts carrying all this weight that sometimes has nothing to do with actually what they come in and or the value they bring to the organization day in, day out. What do you think about that?
I believe that 100%. And that comes out of our corporate understanding of business.
Okay, talk about that a little bit more.
So we expect the CEO to make more than the vice presidents, who make more than the directors, who make more than the managers, who make more than the, I'll say, tacticians that are doing things. And somewhere in there is the assistants that are helping the various people, and so there is this hierarchy that we expect to pay things, and it comes out of corporate, and it's part of being able to justify where numbers are and all the rest of it. It comes out of government. I mean, there's, all sorts of places that, long history of this. Right. And it's a false narrative for a lot of reasons. But it's easier for us to understand. And our brain likes to go with easy.
Got it.
Right. So we often do start with title, and then we often put a job description around that we think matches that title. And then we slot the roles and responsibilities underneath it. Where I really want to talk about roles. And one of the exercises I've been doing for years is and several of my clients do it as well, is I know I'm doing multiple roles on any given day. And I give them values in kind of symbolic values of what I call single dollar values, double dollar values, triple dollar values, and quad dollar values. Okay. And I actually put some numbers to it, but you don't have to. And I know some of the roles I do are single dollar values. They are not the highest, best use of my time, but I also know it's some of the stuff I need to do. Some of them are double, some of them are triple. A quad dollar is more rare. That's when I'm really creating huge value. Okay. Right. That's way more rare. Most of my stuff falls in the triple and twos, and I track it to make sure that it stays in the triple and double dollar values. Right. I also know, but by thinking about my roles in that way, I also know what does it make sense to offload first. Right. So if I can offload more of the single dollar values, that probably makes sense if I'm running out of time. That's a key thing. If I'm running out of time, if I don't actually have time to do things. And then knowing what are my double dollar values, what are my triple dollar values. So like for me, customer service delivery is a triple dollar value. It's one of the last things I'm going to take off of my list. It's also one of the things that I love most. It is where, it is part of my role. So part of my role is customer delivery. Okay. Wouldn't have to be. Other people, that's not their role. Right. And that's the key thing of understanding what these roles are, is to say, is this something that I want to keep? Is it something that I love? Is it something that provides value to me and to the organization? And like I said, there could be someone else who's like, oh, the whole customer delivery piece is not the piece that I love. I love the sales piece. I'm just making this up. Right.
Yeah.
And so they may value that differently. They would hand off that role differently at a different point in time. But by thinking in the roles, then we can say, where are we actually providing the best value and compensating according to that value that's really, really happening. And getting less worried about titles.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so, to sum up, don't stress so much about titles. Focus more on the roles and that the responsibilities and the job description makes sense within the role. And if somebody's going to have multiple roles, then that needs to be indicated as well somewhere. And the reason that needs to be indicated is because the gears get gummed up, don't they, Gwen? When we're not clear on who does what and why they do it, whether they do it because they're in charge of marketing or they do it because they're Susie and Susie loves creating designs in Canva, for instance.
Right.
How else do you think this misalignment of roles, or just say lack of clarity around the roles that somebody is performing, what other bottlenecks do you think it causes?
It causes huge communication issues as well. Because if you don't really understand the roles, then you don't understand where the roles connect. And so using your, Susie loves Canva example, they could be a really good resource for marketing and understanding that role may not be her role.
Mm-hmm.
And so, using us, let's say we had, Susie was part of our team. The marketing role is still yours. You may be using her as a resource, but the role is still yours. That means if there's anything going on in marketing, I'm still going to you. I'm not going to Susie because you own the role, right? You can talk to Susie, but me talking to Susie just becomes the communication problem, because you don't know that I've talked to Susie and you gave Susie one direction for one thing and I saw something that I didn't like. And so now Susie's changed it and you're like, why the hell did you change that, Susie? Right.
Right.
And so the communication piece is the key thing for understanding the roles. Who goes where and why.
Well, and I think also in that same vein with the communication piece, if Susie's job is not Canva, let's say Susie's the project manager for the team and she just happens to be the best designer in Canva the whole company has, and so she does a lot of support for marketing, but when push comes to shove, when it comes to performance evaluations, when it comes to looking at Susie's body of work, Susie is going to be judged at the project she's managing and how well she's doing that piece of her job, not how well the social media ads performed because of Susie's amazing designs. So when she has to prioritize, the project management has to come first, and marketing doesn't get to get mad at Susie for not having time for that.
Unless it's become really clear that part of Susie's role is Canva design, and that's part of that communication is, 80% of her job is project management and 20% is Canva design. And so we will also weight, performance in those areas at that level. And it allows Susie then to be able to say, hey, marketing, you're needing 50% of my time. I don't have that time based on this allocation. And then that allows for, marketing to come to CEO and say, we need more of Susie's time, or we need to bring someone who is going to be the Canva expert, right? We can start evaluating the roles and saying, I realize we don't need as much project management. Let's make it 50-50 for Susie now. Let's check and see. Or, no, we actually need more of Susie's time on project management. It's time to bring in a Canva expert.
Right. Or at the very least, a design expert. Doesn't have to be Canva.
Yeah.
But so what you're really saying, though, is, in the communication aspect, is everybody in the organization needs to understand what Susie's role is and about how much time she is allocated for each thing. And Susie needs to be aware of it too. So that when two people, and when I worked in higher ed, I used to always talk about, because there's like all these directors and they don't always talk to each other. And so I used to say, okay, Mom, Dad said this. I need you guys to talk to each other before you tell us kids what to do. Right? Because the kids don't know who to listen to.
Right.
So
right.
we think everybody's direction is on equal footing. And so Susie needs to know, okay, this is 20% of my job, which means I get to say, hey, marketing, this is taking a bigger chunk. Help me prioritize this or help me reconfigure the deadlines. What would you say, aside from this example that we're kind of teasing out right now, what would you say are some other signs that a CEO can be looking out for to know whether there's role confusion in their organization?
The the biggest is asking anybody, what are your roles? Now they're going to start telling you their tasks, which is different. Tasks are part of a role.
Right.
Um, and part of the role is knowing what you're responsible for. That's the key thing with role. And this is why I love roles, is it's saying, what am I responsible for? So, still using our same example because I like it. Susie's responsible for creating graphics, but she's not responsible for marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so she knows where she reports to and who is responsible because the role is clearly defined.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And she knows that she does not report to me as CEO about her graphics.
Right.
Right. So it does start creating an organizational chart, but I don't think of a role chart and an organizational chart as exactly the same thing.
Mm.
Okay. It does start, there is crossover and they start creating that in time. But if we start with roles, because Susie probably is reporting to the project manager, the senior project manager, or she may be reporting to the CEO.
Right.
Right. But that's, in the true, reporting organization piece. But also understanding roles is, as soon as she wants to start talking to me as CEO about graphics, I say, no, that does not come to me. That goes to Tonya.
Mm-hmm.
And then if Tonya has questions, it comes to me.
Right.
So it really is about making sure that when you ask people, what are you doing and who do you report to and who's responsible for it, they're really clear about that. Where are the communication lines and who is responsible? That is really the key thing for the roles. Who is responsible for this piece? And most people don't know that they're responsible.
Mm.
And that's where the roles start becoming really clear. Is when you can define the role, you can say, and these are the things that you're responsible for.
Okay.
And by defining that responsibility, that allows for way easier delegation, way easier, definition, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But my number one clue is when I say, tell me about the roles, and they tell me about the things they're doing, and if they can't even kind of group them together in logical pieces, it's like, oh yeah, you don't understand that that's 6 roles.
Right.
You see this as one job.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you're saying, I've got to do this and this and this, that's marketing. I've got to do this and this and this, that's chief of staff. I've got to do this, this, and this. It's like, okay, you've got roles. Very few people can do that.
Right. So to help people do that, I think you've walked us through the steps that are required to create role clarity in the organization, right? So the first thing you can do if you've got a team, right? If you haven't started building out your team yet, or if you've already started building out your team, you ask everybody what their role is. And, before you can do that, you probably should have your own idea, right?
Yes.
Of what everybody's role is, what you believe they're responsible for. So that's actually step 1. Step 2 is to ask each individual what their role is so that you can see if you're in alignment or not. And then third is establishing the clear reporting lines. Like, okay, right. So if you actually have 5 roles, within those 5 roles, you may not report to all one person, right? You can't be the direct line to the CEO, because this is what I see in growing organizations is everybody wants to be the CEO's direct report.
Right.
And the CEO has a really hard time extricating themselves from that. And then finally is defining what you're actually responsible for. And I would say maybe after that is, if you're unsure about that responsibility, who you ask. Does that feel like it captures it?
Yep, totally captures it.
Okay.
But definitely step number one
Mm-hmm.
is start with a pretty blank sheet of paper and say, for the organization to work the way I want, what are the roles that need to be and how do they group together? And like I said, roles for me is about tasks that logically group together.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now I'm going to ask the really hard question, Gwen.
Oh,
you ready?
Great.
Okay, we just talked about how you make this happen. How do you keep it in place? How do you maintain the clarity as the organization ages and evolves?
So it's actually looking at this on a regular basis, and it depends on how fast things are changing. Right? If they're changing really fast, you probably need to be looking at it at least quarterly. If they're at just a slightly fast pace or normal pace, probably once a year is adequate, right? But everyone should look at it at least once a year, even if what they come back with is, nope, all is good. Part of the reason being because the world is changing fast enough. Mm-hmm. Like, who would have expected there might need to be an AI expert role in businesses 2 or 3 years ago?
Right.
But depending on what your business is and all of that could be a role. The person who really understands how to leverage, Claude and ChatGPT and all of those things effectively and do the right prompts, that could be a role. No one would have anticipated that 3 or 4 years ago as a role.
Right.
And even if the business didn't change a lot and the rest of the roles are static, there may be a new role. And where does that fall? And who uses it? And how do you access it? And all of those things. So at least once a year, really looking at the role chart and saying, are there new roles? And are there things that people are doing that don't fit into any of these roles? And either do we need to update the role or do we need to add a new role?
Great. Okay. So what I took away from our episode, Gwen, and I think the last bit was the best bit almost, is that first of all, when it comes to role clarity in a growing business, I hate to break it to you, dear listener, but it's really on the shoulders of you as the CEO to get that ball rolling.
100%.
So, right? Like everybody is going to take their direction from you. And even if you're not comfortable being the boss in this way, you've got to be the boss in this way. Then you need to sit down and really look at, based on what the organization needs, not my personal preference, who I like, what they like doing. I know that our really relationship focused CEOs love to give people their ideal dream jobs in all the ways. But stepping out of that and saying, okay, based on where I want my organization to go down the line, these are the roles that I have or I need. These are the responsibilities that fall under those. These are the people who are performing those. And then where are our clear reporting lines, making sure that those are established, even if that means somebody reports to a couple of different people, depending on what role they're performing. And then reinforcing that responsibility, like you are fully responsible here. This is what responsibility means. And then to your final point, reevaluating that or revisiting that at least once a year, unless you're in some pretty rapid growth, then maybe it's even quarterly. Did I leave anything out?
I don't believe so.
Yes, this is
nice
my mission.
Job.
Correct summaries. Yay. All right. So today's episode has been highlighting the importance of clearly defined roles and responsibilities in your business, no matter how delightfully tiny your team may be. And if clarity is something that you're looking for more individually or within your business, Gwen and I have something special for you. It's called Insight to Impact, and it is our premium weekly email subscription that helps you gain clarity on your business one reflection at a time. Each Friday, you will receive a thought-provoking question designed to help you examine one specific aspect of your business. And when you respond, you get personalized feedback to help you implement positive changes that create sustainable, consistent performance across your business. So head over to everydayeffectiveness.com/impact to learn more. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallywant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.